Welcome to The Megyn Kelly Show, your home for open, honest, and provocative conversations. Hey everyone, it's Megyn Kelly. Welcome to The Megyn Kelly Show. Today, Tim Dillon. You're going to love this. You want to laugh? Stay tuned. This guy is hilarious. He has been called the funniest philosopher of his generation, a genius. He was named one of the top 10 comics you need to know by Rolling Stone in 2017, New York's funniest at Caroline's in 2016, and he's been putting out hilarious videos on social media that caught my attention and made me fall for this guy. He's spectacular. Did a thing on the Viking, on the Capitol Hill riot, which I had to say, like that day we all needed a laugh, and he put it out like the day after and sort of broke the frost in a way, which I really appreciated. He did a great bit on Hilaria Baldwin, who he's got some thoughts on. I'll ask him. And he's just he is a social philosopher. He was big on Joe Rogan. He went on there not long ago with Alex Jones. Perhaps you heard news of that. But I think you're going to like him a lot. So we'll get to Tim in just one second. But first, let's talk about the zebra. The zebra is going to make your life better and easier. When you look for insurance, it's kind of a pain in the neck, isn't it? I mean, who knows? It's like you start calling company after company. You have to go through all this personal information in order to get accurate quotes. That's where the zebra comes in. They will make this process super easy and almost pleasant. When you use thezebra.com, insurance will finally feel like it's in black and white. Get it? No more confusion. Just honest rates from real companies. The Zebra is actually the nation's leading insurance comparison site for car and home insurance, and they can help you save money today. So easy. You go to thezebra.com, you just answer a few questions to compare accurate insurance quotes for free. The Zebra is going to protect your personal information and make sure there are no hidden fees or surprises along the way. And you can secure your insurance from thezebra.com, or if you prefer to do it by phone, do that. And you can speak with one of their licensed insurance agencies. How much money can you save on car or home insurance? Visit thezebra.com/Kelly to find out. That's THEZEBRA.com/Kelly for insurance in black and white. Check it out. Tim Dillon, how are you?
Good morning, Megyn. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine. I've been following you on Twitter, and you're so funny. And just the chance to talk to you was obviously what I was going to jump at. But then I started to read up on you and learn more about you. And I love this description. I love this. Conservative-leaning gay man from Long Island who says the average citizen might describe his aesthetic as retired detective.
Yeah. I think that might cover all the bases.
What does that mean, retired detective? Like Lenny Briscoe kind of?
I look like a guy who, has left the force, but he's always been tortured by one case, and he sits at a bar and he just wants to, get back in to solve that one cold case from 10 years ago that haunted him. I feel like that's the way I sound. That's the way my voice sounds. That's the aesthetic I have, just kind of that tortured Irish guy.
I'm thinking of Sipowicz, remember? NYPD Blue?
Yeah, of course I do. I used to watch that show every day. I love that show.
But I think we're being too unkind to you because you're actually a handsome guy. You do
well,
not.
That's very sweet.
A retired detective, I guess, maybe a little slovenly.
I do the best I can for the Irish. The Irish are a race of people. We will never compete, I think, with the other races in just pure looks. That's why we're funny and we tell stories and we're fun to be around. And I think everybody's got, so I think I try to do the best I can with what I have, with fair skin that's prone to get red. And, this is just,
yes.
You got to do the best you can with the Irish aesthetic.
I can relate to all of that. I mean, thankfully, I'm a gal, so, I wear makeup and I can make myself look better. But there is sort of a curse that comes with the Irish heritage. But there's balance in life. You're right. You tend to be funny. You tend to be a good storyteller. And if you can't laugh at yourself, you get kicked out of your family as an Irish kid.
That's exactly right. You have to be able to roll with the punches.
And you have to be able to throw a lot of punches, too.
That's exactly right.
And that's fine. I was joking the other day that there's Bridget Fetisi was on, and we were talking about how no Irish person has ever gotten offended at anything. You'll never hear the Irish complaining about a joke at their expense because we're built to laugh at ourselves and to think stuff like that is funny. And I have yet to meet the Irish person who can be offended by anything.
Yes, that's true. I hope that stays true. I mean, my family, I remember that this was a tough family that loved each other, but would fight and would argue, and they would debate. And there were people that were right-wing people and left-wing people and people that didn't believe at all in politics and people that were conspiracy theorists, and it never mattered. So it's always strange to me in this new climate where if you disagree with someone, you're supposed to exile them from your life or your community. That doesn't hold water with me at all, because I just remember growing up in these crazy environments with these large families where no one agreed on anything and everything was still okay. So I think this idea that words are going to bruise you or they're going to do serious damage that you can't recover from, I don't understand that at all. I'm 36. That's probably generational, but a lot of it is my upbringing, where it's like, a lot of people said a lot of things, and then everybody kind of made up and put it past them.
Exactly right. And it's part of it's linked to, I think, being on the Radical Honesty program, where I wouldn't say no feeling is spared growing up, but it's pretty close. I mean, we definitely, my family and most of the Irish families I know, lean towards just saying it how it was. And I'll give you one example. Tell me if you can relate to this in your own upbringing. But my family wound up becoming a blended family, as I lost my dad to a heart attack when I was in high school. And my mom got remarried 4 years later to a guy who had 3 kids, and he had lost his wife to cancer. So the 3 kids on his side and the 3 kids on our side wind up together. And he had 2 sons and a daughter. And the daughter at the time was around 15 when she first came into our family. And she was a big talker. She liked to talk. They're Irish too. She talked a lot. My brother, my older brother, sat next to her at dinner one night, and he interrupts her and he says, "Why are you telling me this story?" Then he says, "Look, if we're going to be in the same family, you're going to have to learn how to cut to the chase." And this poor girl's looking at him like, what the hell? But you know what? He did her a favor, because everyone's got to have that skill in life.
Yeah. I mean, there's something beautiful about the Irish experience where it's like we feel like we're always underdogs. And I think that's part of it, right? So I think part of the Irish experience, and my family's really, my grandfather came over from Cork, and my nanny was from Galway. And he came over at 4 years old, and they were tough. And he grew up poor, and I mean really poor. Like, they would move every time the rent was due. And I mean, he had a large family. And, he built a business. He ended up being a general contractor. It took him a long time, but he built a big, beautiful house that he lived in Long Island. He was a devoutly religious guy. He was very tough. He, I remember my father got in a bar fight. I think this was in my father's nose. My father's nose is still a little crooked. He called my grandfather and he goes, if you gave me $5,000, I could fix my nose. I think my grandfather was like, well, it's just a good thing you're not a model, and hung up. So it was kind of like, figure it out. My grandfather had that attitude of like, he was a loving guy and he was generous, but he was also like, you got to figure your life out. Like, I think he had 6, 7 children. One of them died of cancer, sadly, but it was old school. Like, it wasn't, you weren't going to get your hand held. You were loved and you were supported, but you were also expected to kind of go out and fight the way that they fought for whatever you wanted. And I think that is, kind of that enduring quality of like that underdog, mentality that Irish people have. Now obviously we weren't nearly as disadvantaged as African Americans or other groups of people, but I mean, the Irish kind of had a little bit of a time of it when they came to this country. So I think that is part of what makes us into these storytellers. We talk a little too much. We make a lot of jokes. We're trying to get a seat at the table. And I think that the way we try to do that is by wrestling the attention away from who's ever speaking. And I mean, whatever we have to do. I mean, I have aunts that will stand up in the middle of a family party and start singing a song forcing everyone to just stare at them. I mean, my aunt would sing memories from Cats, and I mean, she's a horrible singer, but we would all just, every year, we knew Memories was coming when she had had a few drinks, and we all just had to sit and listen to that, and she would just out of nowhere start belting out, midnight, and we'd go, okay, here we go. So it really was just a fight for attention. I think part of that, I guess, is that we all kind of feel like we're underdogs in a way.
Mm-hmm. So do you have that? Do you love attention?
I do. I mean, I do. And, when you look back at my kid video, it's embarrassing. When I was 2 or 3 years old, I would be hamming it up in front of the camera and doing everything I can. I'd dump ice cream on my head. I'd do anything I could to get attention. Most comedians have that in them where they just wanted to be the center of attention. And no matter, what, I mean, it's hard to watch because they're just insufferable when you watch them, because it's a kid who's just demanding everyone looks at him when he was 2, 3, just going, I want all the eyeballs on me.
So, but how does that parlay from, oh, Tim's so funny, he's a class clown. God, that guy's hilarious, into, oh my God, he's trying to make a career out of it?
Yeah, well, you fail at a lot of other things. So that's important. I think failure is important, and we don't ever talk about failure. Every motivational speaker goes out and tells you how to succeed. And that's kind of maybe puts people at a disadvantage. I think you have to try the things that you're not suited for before you find the thing that you are suited for. And I tried a lot of things. I mean, I was in sales. I tried to, be in finance. I was trying to live this life that wasn't for me. I love sales. Like, I still like salespeople. I read about business and, but it wasn't for me. I wasn't as good at it as I could be because I didn't work hard at it. And the reason I didn't work hard at it is I didn't really love it. And then when I found comedy when I was 25, I started pretty late. I found the thing that I loved enough to work so hard at that I would kind of sacrifice the rest of my life to just get good at this and to be good at it. Because when I was on stage, I felt like this is where I belonged. But it took a while to get there. It took, community college, and it took debate club, and it took majoring in political science, then dropping out because, and no offense, but all the people that were in politics and journalism were insufferable. None of them were fun. None of them were fun. I remember we would go to these debate tournaments, and I beat these 2 girls that were on their way to Harvard, and I was at a community college, and they were crying afterwards, and I was like, and all these guys just wanted to talk about politics endlessly all night, and I was like, and I'm trying to make jokes, I'm trying to have fun, and everybody took themselves so seriously, and I was just turned off by it. I'm like, I don't want to spend my life with these people. And then, God, listen, we know that they exist and there's a reason for them, but I was just totally turned off by that. So I'm like, well, I don't want to be in, and I thought I was going to be in that. I thought I was a debate guy, and I was good at debate. I was really good at being a debate. And I was like, I'm going to be in politics. I'm going to run a presidential campaign. I'm going to be, whatever the case may be. And, I was running around. I was 19 years old, talking about how we have to honor our commitment to the people of Iraq. I had no idea what I was talking about, but I'm like, this seems, I was hardcore evangelist of George W. Bush. Thought he was great, thought everything we were doing was phenomenal. Now I look back on it, I'm like, yes, some of that probably wasn't the move, but I really was going hardcore into politics. And then I took a step back, and I was like, all right, I'm going to do finance. I'm going to be a business guy because I just want to make money. And then I realized I don't love money enough, sadly. I love making a good living, but I don't love money enough to make my life just about money. So then at 25 years old, after the 2008, when the market had collapsed, I was like, let me just see if I'm funny and see if I can be funny professionally, which I didn't even know what the route to it was. There was no blueprint. So I got into it at 25 when I kind of had nothing else going on. And I spent the last 10 years just getting as funny as I could on every platform that I could.
That sounds terrifying. I mean, first of all, I can relate to the first part so much, your experience of politics and debate and media. And actually just listening to you explain it, I was like, oh my God, this is my life too. I just wasn't as smart as you were to get out. I spent so many years in it thinking why is everyone looking at me like I'm being inappropriate again?
Right.
I used
Well,
to
you
say,
did well. I mean, Megyn,
I'm
you
a
did
bull in
well.
a china shop, right? That's how you feel.
I think you did well. I think, in fact, I wasn't as smart as you were to keep going, maybe.
But feeling like a fish out of water is what I'm saying. Like you feel like,
Yes.
I don't know why, but these people are looking at me like I'm inappropriate and I think I'm hilarious.
Right. Right. I just remembered like going out after debate tournaments and we would like, sit down at these restaurants and I was like, okay, so the debates are over, right? And then they never would end. I mean, it would never end. It would never end. So I was like, does this ever end? Can we ever just goof around? Can we ever talk about anything else? Life is about more than politics. And this is something I tell people now. Life is about more. I mean, my aunt called me the other day. She goes, now that, because she was like hardcore, like, she would call me every day. Trump is the worst thing that's ever happened to us, and blah, blah, blah. And coronavirus is killing every human being that's ever lived. And I'm like, okay, thank you. I don't need this, negativity. But I mean, every day she would call. And then finally Biden got inaugurated and she called me and she goes, me and your uncle, we went bird watching today and there were hawks in the trees. It was beautiful. And I'm like, you could have been doing that for the last 4 years. Like There were hawks in the trees. You chose to be miserable for 4 years. You chose that. And so to me, I'm like, there's just more to life than this endless, because most people, you're never going to meet Nancy Pelosi. Most of us, I have uncles that, Nancy Pelosi is the center of everything that bothers them. And I'm like, you'll never meet this woman. You're letting someone affect you who you'll never meet and who has some degree of control over you, but not nearly as much as you think. I mean, truly not you. There's a lot you can do completely that doesn't involve what Nancy Pelosi does or doesn't do or says or doesn't say. So to me, I've always been like, there's more to life than politics. And the people that were deeply into politics never felt like that to me. They were always like, no, this is the be all end all. And I'm like, this is so weird. You get a certain amount of time on this planet and you choose one team and then somebody else chooses another team and you just fight forever. And that's it. That's the only experience you want to have. And that felt very empty to me and not fun. And I love having fun, and that just wasn't fun.
So it reminds me of when I lived in D.C. for a little while, and I used to go out to the happy hours there. And this is, I was much younger. I was, 30, around there. And you'd get these guys coming over to you in the bar. First of all the women would be wearing sweater sets with pearls. And I was like, what?
Right.
What? Right. And then all the guys would come over and like in their suits. These are like young aides to congressmen on Capitol Hill. And everyone would assume you knew who their congressman was. It's like, I never even heard of him. I certainly never heard of you. And I never even heard of your congressman. So I'm not impressed. And they would put their hand out and they to meet you, and they would shake your hand, or they would shake it hard, like they were trying to impress you with their muscle, and say things like, and how are you enjoying Washington? And I'm like, oh my God, I am never letting this guy get on top of me. Ever.
Right. Yeah, DC is too much. It's a great city to perform comedy in because it's like everyone there is just morally compromised, and it's great to just point out everybody in the audience and imagine, what they do for a living. It's a lot of fun to perform in that city. But to me, it was never a city that I could live in. I was just like, I love New York because people in New York talk about real estate and food. I mean, that's really what everyone in New York talks about. They go, who got what apartment where and how much and why and how many roommates or no roommates and who's buying a condo and who's got the, and it's all about real estate and it's all about where you live. And they talk about neighborhoods and they talk about food. We have, brutal debates about restaurants. And you got to go to this place. No, this Pizza Supreme is better. No, they were good 6 months ago. They changed the dough. It's all over now. The whole thing. And we just had these brutal fights about food and about neighborhoods. And that to me was very fun and very local, and it affected you. And that's what people talked about in New York. They talk about money. And DC is all about power and politics, and everybody wants to have a prestige position. And to me, it was all like, I don't know. It wasn't funny. I don't like political comedy. Like I do a lot of social comedy, right? So like I talk about a lot of cultural things, and I certainly touch on politics and stuff, but like that blatantly political comedy never really was my thing. Like I respect the people who do it. It's very hard to do it right. But to me, it just divides the audiences immediately. Mm-hmm. And I always look at like the larger truth that's buried under this kind of horse race political angle that a lot of people are going for now. So I always was like not so much into DC, but I love it's probably my favorite, and ironically, it's my favorite city to perform stand-up comedy in, and because there's a lot of tension there, and releasing tension is what comedians should strive to do, and that city is always tense, and when you can break that tension, people are really grateful.
Oh, those poor people are desperate to laugh. They're not allowed to laugh at all anymore. Everything's so deadly serious, and
It's
most of all
true.
themselves. To your point about
Right.
New York, I can tell you it's the only city I've ever lived in or visited where it's like before somebody comes like somebody comes over to your house for the first time, and before they leave, it's understood by all involved that they will be getting a full tour of your apartment. They will be looking
Yes.
at the master bedroom, the master bathroom.
Yes.
It's just understood. Of
Yes.
course, I want to see your real estate.
Yes, you become a realtor. You talk about how much it costs. People have no problem in New York going, let me ask you what you pay. I mean, there's
Right?
really no problem asking you what you paid. There's something fun about that to me. It's kind of fun. Real estate's hilarious to me. I always I think it's very funny. I think it's silly. I think a lot of my videos that I do online are silly. They're goofy, right? I mean, like, so
Yeah.
to me, it's like, the discussion of bedrooms and bathrooms and finishes and marble and granite and windows are very funny and kind of they make me laugh. It's ultimately meaningless, right? It's utterly mean. I've lived in big houses and small houses. I've had really nice cars and I've driven beater cars. And, obviously it's better to have more money, but my actual day-to-day happiness doesn't really change. If I have good friends and I'm laughing and I feel like my career is going well, where you live it's not as meaningful as people make it out to be. But I just love, the way people make it into the most important thing in the world is, your view.
Somehow you've arrived. So
Right.
just hearing you talk and actually having seen you before, something that's standing out to me is you sound happy. Like
Yes.
I don't think of happy when I think of comedians. I think of more the sad clown and like they're wrestling and they're tortured and they're dark, but they're awesome and they're funny and they're clever and they're really witty about society and observers of it. But happy's not a word that comes to mind. I guess maybe ironically, given what they do for a living. Do you think you're an anomaly in the comedy circuit?
No, I'm happy now things are going well. I mean, like,
Right.
I think I'm happy now that I'm in a good place creatively. The things I'm proud of what I make. I'm proud of the show I do every week, the podcast. I've gotten great opportunities to do some of the biggest podcasts in the world, and guys like Joe Rogan have helped me out tremendously. And so the happiness, I think, just comes from the idea that I worked really hard at something for a long time, but now it's starting to like come together and I have the freedom to do the things that I want to do. But like, I think comedians, I don't think it's that we're miserable, but I do think it's that we're all sensitive and we all are noticing things. We all feel things, and we all have to convert that to funny. So if I am upset, I try to convert it immediately to humor, which can be healthy, but it also cannot be, because it's a great way to just, not acknowledge your problems and not fix them is by making them funny. And this is the
Mhm.
real problem with a lot of comedians. It doesn't matter what the problem happens to be. You can easily make fun of it and not really address it. So there is that problem with comedians, and that's just been forever, right? That could be your love life, your relationship to drugs, alcohol, food, depression, anything, your family, your past traumas. Like, we make a living by making those things funny. And a lot of times that's just putting a Band-Aid over them and not really addressing them. So I think that's where the like sad clown comes from, is the idea that we make things that bother us funny. So, but they're still there. They still bother us, but that's kind of what we do. That's how we come to be funny. So I think I'm happy because I think I'm grateful. I'm lucky. I think a lot of us are lucky to do what we do. I think I'm lucky. I worked very hard to have the job. I also feel lucky to have the job, right? So I feel like I'm lucky. I have all the qualifications to do what I want to do, and so that makes me, when you see what people go through all the time, and this is what's really been lost in this new, climate that we're in, where when you look at who's a real victim, who's truly in trouble, who deals with things with their own health or with their own family in these really tough situations, the majority of people out there are very lucky. The majority of us, I don't care where you come from or what you're dealing with, the majority of us are just lucky to be here, to live here, to be in this time, to have our health, to have functioning brains, to be able to work and pursue things that we want to do. So we can't ever lose sight of that. Now, a lot of times we do lose sight of that because we're human beings. But I think I try to remind myself that at baseline here, I'm pretty lucky to be a comedian for a living in the year 2021 and to be able to earn money while many people are in trouble and suffering because we have this horrible situation right now with a shutdown. And so I think that's where I try to derive the happiness from, just perspective.
Back to Tim in 1 second, but first, you never thought COVID could cost you your home, right? Well, it could, because cybercrime is up 75% in the midst of all these lockdowns. 75%. It's like the cyber criminals are bored and they found a new crime to commit and you're vulnerable. By far, the most serious cybercrime to worry about is home title theft. And most people have never heard of it. Cyber criminals, foreign and domestic, are now after our homes. And it's a lot easier to steal them than you'd think. No, not the bricks and mortar, but the title documents to our homes. They're all online now. And these thieves will find your home's title and then forge your signature on a quitclaim deed stating, oh, you sold your home to them. Then they'll take out loans on your home and leave you in debt. You don't even know any of this has happened until the late payment or eviction notices start arriving. Insurance doesn't cover you for this crime, and neither do common identity theft programs. And that's why you need to protect your home with Home Title Lock. The instant Home Title Lock detects someone tampering with your home's title, they will help shut it down. You go to HometitleLock.com, register your address to see if you're already a victim, and then use code RADIO to receive 30 free days of protection. That's code RADIO at HometitleLock.com, HometitleLock.com. So what do you make of all these late night comedians going exactly the opposite way, right? They turn themselves from people who make you laugh into people who make you upset and sad, angry. I haven't watched Colbert during the entire Trump presidency, but I see the clips, and Kimmel. God, they're so dark now.
Something happened, and I've talked to a lot of smart people out here in LA, which I'm getting out of soon, going right to Texas. But I talked to a lot of smart people here, because I've always been interested in where this started, and I think that it might have started with when Tina Fey did that really brilliant and funny impression of Sarah Palin on SNL, and it may have also started with Jon Stewart, an equally brilliant guy who did a very funny show called The Daily Show. But what started to happen eventually, was that people started to believe that their job was to be a teacher, was to be somebody who would affect culture with political humor. And that it would not be for the sake of being funny. I mean, there's been political humor forever. And I'm sure some of it was written with the intent that it would affect people. But there became this idea, and it became rather explicit, that the job of a comedian was to move the needle in a meaningful way in the political world. And I don't know where that happened, but those are two good examples of where it may have began, where it was the Sarah Palin, because that nailed Sarah Palin. That impression was viral and people talked about it, and people were saying that, I don't know if she could recovered from that. It was so good and it was kind of right on. And then of course Jon Stewart did kind of a great job at being this political comedian that did provide real information. But what has happened, like everything else, is that it has grown into a cottage industry of people who are putting their opinion in front of their comedy. And this is a big problem because it's not always funny. And in fact, it rarely is funny. And that's why you just use the word dark, which is a great word for it, because when you're putting your opinion out first and you're not worrying about the content, the humor, you're not recognizing the humanity of your opponents. You're not seeing the other side, which is what comics should always do. It's how you can really be funny, especially about meaningful topics, is looking at someone else's. I mean, there's not a great lawyer out there who can't argue the other side of their case. I mean, it's essential, right? It's the whole point of a great attorney, a great litigator, is that they know what the other side's going to do and they understand the strengths of the other side. And I think he's a great comedian whose job is to make, large numbers of strangers laugh. You have to kind of have some baseline respect for them as human beings. And when we turn everything into this endless, festival of politics and politicized identities, we forget that the people that disagree with us are human beings, and that those people, are not enemies. They're people that, for whatever reason, have a different experience than you. So when I watch those late night hosts, I go, they're at the best way to say it is they're not really doing their job, and they've carved out this, group of people that want to hear them say things they agree with, similar to somebody on maybe Fox or MSNBC. And to me, it's not interesting, and it does get dark, and it gets sad because they don't want to do it. When you look at Jimmy Kimmel, he doesn't really want to do it. You're just making so much money, and you become a cog in this Hollywood machine, and you're getting $20 million, $30 million. You're expected to do it, but they don't want to do it. You could see it in their faces that nobody got into comedy to lecture people about who to vote for. Nobody.
Are you surprised to see that these guys being treated as these sage advisors in this serious suit? I mean, to me, it's antithetical to what a comedian generally looks like and projects like and wants to be perceived as.
Yeah. Well, what it is also, people have Google. People can remember that Chelsea Handler made a living doing race material. And now Chelsea Handler does documentaries about white privilege. Jimmy Kimmel had a show called The Man Show where they did wet t-shirt contests, and now he's talking about health insurance. Stephen Colbert did a show where he was a very funny, kind of guy that was impersonating Bill O'Reilly. And then now everything, and he got away with saying a lot of crazy things because it was satire and it was very funny. And now a lot of these same people exist. They act like satire doesn't exist. And if you say something, you're dead serious about it. And if you make a racial joke, you're a racist. Or if it's a homophobic joke, you're a homophobe. Or if you make a joke about trans people, you're diminishing the trans identity. And all of these people are very Googleable. They've all had long careers. None of them felt this way years ago. And I don't mean you don't have to go back 10 years. You can go back right before Trump got into the primaries. This is a relatively new phenomenon in mass where all of these people are every day tweeting. I have comedian friends of mine that are tweeting about trade agreements all day. And it's what are you doing? They're tweeting at Mayor Garcetti. They're these people have roommates. They're on drugs. And they're going, what's the budget of LA? The cops better be not getting more than this percentage of the budget. I'm like, the budget? You can't afford a car. So it's a mind virus. Truly, it's a mind virus. And people like me have been, I think, pretty well received, kind of pointing it out, because a lot of people are going oh yeah, man, that's kind of the way I feel. They grew up watching these comics. These guys were very funny. Colbert, Kimmel, these guys were really, really funny people. But now I think they feel that for whatever reason that isn't their job. They have to do what they're doing.
And I read something. It was you. It was a bit you were doing about him saying something like the comedians are the ones who get on stage and basically say we're fucked up, we're fat, we can't stop doing horrible things. Only a psychopath would look at us and say, "Yes, show me the way."
It's crazy. Could you imagine going out to a nightclub and then asking the guy on stage for tax advice? We've lost our minds here. This is completely insane. I don't go to my dentist, lay in the chair and go, let's be funny now. People got to specialize in things. You can't be everything. And this flies in the face of a lot of the ethos of young people today who want to be everything. They're like, I want to be a YouTuber and a rapper and a stock mogul, and I want to start an app, and I want to be a venture capitalist, and I want to be an artist and write 3 books, and I want to be a chef and have a line of, it's guys, we need to get good at a thing here. And then we need to start there and then maybe move on. But this idea that you would ever look at the comedian, hopefully we say things that are smart. Hopefully we say things that are funny. Hopefully we make you think. I didn't tell anyone to vote. I got flack for this. People go like this to get a voting plan. I had comedians were going on Twitter going, get a voting plan. What are we doing? What is a voting plan? Get to the poll and vote. You all got a Popeye's chicken sandwich. You can vote. This idea that no one knows how to vote. We got to come up with a plan. We got to and the idea that I, who put on wigs and say crazy things and I'm funny and a goofball and admit all these embarrassing things about my life. I'm going to tell you who to vote for. It's just not my job. It's not my job. If you want me to do that, then go somewhere else. Go find another person who's going to tell you to vote, and then it's so important to vote. It's just, to me, it's patronizing. I'm not patronizing you. If you're going to vote, you're going to vote. If you're not going to vote, you're not going to vote. It's absolutely none of my business. You know, it would be insane. It would be like me being on stage and like, looking at my audience and pointing out a guy in the audience and going, hey, why don't you call your brother? Have you spoken to your brother recently? Why don't you call him? What about your wife? Have you taken her out? It's like, dude, what am I, a life coach? I'm trying to be goofy.
Yeah. It reminds me of, I was talking to my decorator the other day, and he's amazing and he's awesome. And he submitted this plan and I'm like, yeah, approved. And he and his team are looking at me like, really? And I'm like, look, I'm going to be honest with you. When it comes to decorating a house, I don't have very good taste. I don't know what I'm doing. You want to talk about Syria? We can talk about Syria. But that I know how to do. But I don't know how to decorate a house. And they said, no one has ever said this to us in 30 years of doing this.
Right. Because everyone's an interior designer. Expert. Yeah. And if you leave it to us, we'll have lace curtains. Everything will look like a funeral. I'm very bad at it too, because as an Irish person, I think everything should look like a wake. So I'm like, we should just have big curtains and big couches where everyone can sit down and cry. But everyone's a specialist in everything. So the problem is, you said it and I said it, dude. I do it too. I'm one of the only dudes who goes to a restaurant and I will go, you pick, to the waiter or waitress. And they're like, floored. I do this because you know why? I go, whatever you bring to the table, I'm going to eat it. Okay. And I'm going to say it's not good. So you just choose. I'm going to complain about it probably on my show, not to you. I never do it to them, but I'm going to trash it on my show. I'm going to tweet about it. I'm going to say I was very disappointed. And then I'm going to come back next week and probably have the same thing. So it doesn't really matter. But I go to restaurants and I go, I love the chef tasting menu. In New York City, we just went out to dinner all the time, spent exorbitant amounts of money, sat there for 3 hours, just drank martinis and ate food. I just have friends that we never went near clubs. We just sat in restaurants for 3 hours and they would just bring us food and we would just talk and drink. And I love the chef's tasting menu because I go, I don't know what he should make or she. You make it. Bring it to me. I'll eat it. And the idea of that is crazy now. Everybody now is a specialist in everything. And they're ready to tell you how you should do it. It'll be like me telling you how to be a journalist. I don't know the first thing about interviewing anybody, about doing research. To me, it would be like, for me to tell you how to do it, it would be completely absurd. I did Red Eye. It was fun. And Red Eye at Fox, like comedians would come on and we'd sit next to John Bolton. And they'd go, well, Tim, what do you think about Syria? I go, Syria? I don't have shows there. It's just, it's like I can make fun of it and I will, and maybe I have an intelligent take on it, but it's like I haven't done the research, and neither is anyone else. Neither is Chelsea Handler. They have also not done the research.
She's another one I don't want to hear from anymore. I'm so over Chelsea. I was never under Chelsea Handler, but I really would like her to be quiet. I can't stand her brand of, quote, humor, which, as you point out, is really just lecturing all the rest of us on how we're pieces of shit. And she's amazing. Yeah.
She was also mean for a decade, and now she was like mean. And she was like, her funniest was just being mean. So I get it. She was just like, I'm mean, I'm drunk. Every guy I've met's penis is too small, and no one has money like I do. And it's like, okay, we can get into this. And I thought that was bad. Now she's like talking about the Gaza Strip. I'm like, oh, can you go back to that, please?
That's exactly right. Well, there was an article over the weekend. I guess it came out on Monday, talking about the bomb premiere of SNL this week and how it's just not funny, right? Because their king left, Trump. They don't know what to do without him. It was in the LA Times saying something like, it was uninspired. They said it was unfunny, lazy, crude gags scattered about in forgettable sketches. They don't know what to do without him, and they don't want to touch, the king and queen, Biden and Kamala Harris.
Yeah, Kamala, right? Yeah. Well, what's interesting about SNL is every guy that I knew and gal that had a working class background never got hired for that show. That show's staffed with collegiate, usually Ivy League, Northeastern liberal arts school kids who aren't that or their sense of humor is very specific. And, I had really funny friends that like were garbage men that submitted packets to that show. I mean, great stand-ups, make people laugh all over the country. And they never got into that show. And there's just this weird kind of, they close ranks around a specific type of person that can't have an opinion I remember I knew somebody that was on the show that wrote there for a year, and he brought up, I forget, I think it was a Kennedy assassination. He brought up, a lot of people think there was something shady there. And the whole room kind of looked at him and just kind of dismissed him. And he was bringing it up in the context of like, there's something funny but a joke. He wasn't launching into a like, who killed Kennedy thing. But it was just the idea that you would have any opinion outside of a very mainstream kind of establishment take of liberal politics was so alien to them that they looked at him like he was a QAnon lunatic. They're like, what are you talking about? So that show suffers from that problem of like, they want a very specific group of people, and that's why they're getting the type of comedy they get.
Mm. Well, that's interesting because remember they had Trump, he was the guest host and back in 2015, and then they felt responsible for him winning, and Jimmy Fallon gave him, a normal late night, what used to be a normal late night interview,
Right.
and he messed up his hair and then spent the next 4 years self-flagellating over it because, he got flack for it, the mainstream press, like, oh my God, you gave him a pass. He's the devil incarnate. And you just sat there next to him laughing. And then Jimmy Fallon tried to play this role of a Stephen Colbert type, which was false and not believable. And he wasn't very good at it. And they're all like, SNL and some of these guys, they seem to bear this sort of guilt when it comes to Trump and I don't know, his rise to the top, and now their responsibility to sort of give Biden, I guess, a pass, which so far is what SNL has done.
Well, it's also this weird delusion. It's like Trump's victory had nothing to do with SNL. It had nothing to do with Jimmy Fallon. This is like, again, they continue to center themselves as the most important things in the universe. Trump's rise had to do with a lot of people who were very frustrated with business as usual politics. And Trump, in my estimation, is kind of a little bit of a huckster, had some good ideas, didn't do much, but, loved himself, loved Twitter, loved the rallies. But like his rise is kind of very easily explainable. It has nothing to do with like Jimmy Fallon tussling his hair. It was the idea that we had Jeb Bush going against Hillary Clinton. People like, is this an oligarchy? We're sick of Bushes and Clintons. And here's a bomb that we can kind of throw at this hopelessly corrupt system. And that bomb is Donald Trump, who was incredibly funny and would say things that nobody had ever heard a politician say. But this idea that no one really cares about SNL, I think that's what terrifies these people, is that no one really cares. No one really cares about The Tonight Show. I mean, I can go on YouTube and find, videos that have more views than SNL gets, and I could find them very, very quickly. I don't think that those places are near the bastions of influence that they used to be, and I don't think they're shaping culture in any way, really.
No, you're right. We're seeing a sea change right now when it comes to comedy, and I've seen it in my business too, news, where it's like the audience is moving from what used to be their only option, linear television, cable TV, and so on, to digital, to online, where they're whatever your heart desires, it's there. That's how I got to know you. I didn't see you on television. I saw you online and then started watching your sketches. They were hilarious. So there's just this whole alternate universe that makes SNL less relevant. You'd think they'd be bending over backwards right now to reach out to a greater audience.
They're like cruise ships, right? So when you steer a cruise ship, you can only move it a few degrees one way or another. And then you have people that are coming into the game that are like speedboats. So it's like when the guy does a crazy Capitol riot, I have my producer, me and that producer can make a video lampooning that. We could do it within 24 hours, put it out, and it's seen by 1 million people.
It was literally the funniest thing I've ever seen.
Well,
I
appreciate
funny.
that, and I appreciate you retweeting it. But SNL then, that same idea has to go to a writer's room in a meeting. It has to get approved. It has to go through sales and legal and marketing. Everybody, network people have to okay it. It has to go through all of these channels. And then it gets made at the end of the week, 7 days afterwards. The news cycle's kind of, it doesn't hit as hard as if you can get. So especially when it comes to comedy, speed is important. Brevity is important. Putting out something that's quick and doing something in a few minutes that's just as funny and as shareable as something that people take a week to do. So I think that is really where things are heading. They're heading to these very, kind of independent. Now, obviously, people always consolidate, and it's human nature to kind of collaborate and consolidate. So I'm not saying that these shows will die per se, or maybe they'll emerge in other forms. But like, you don't have a chance in hell to compete with people that are utilizing the internet in a smart way to build a fan base. You just don't. I mean, I think that's the real thing that they're reckoning with right now on TV, on Comedy Central. All of these networks, they don't know what to do because they are completely being outflanked by digital creators every day.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of SNL and your online sketches, one of the funniest things, I made my husband Doug watch it. It was so funny. I've watched it twice. This is, it brought me such pleasure, was your bit on Hilaria Baldwin, who you say we're being far too tough on. We really need to go easier on Hilaria.
Yeah, she wants to be fun. Let her have a little fun. Let her make up an accent. Nothing, and maybe this is the Irish thing, I can't for the life of me, I don't understand why certain things bother people. So if this woman wants to pretend to be, again, a high-end Hispanic woman, like, she's not saying, like, I've had a rough life, and in fact, it's quite the opposite. She's going, yes, I'm rich, and she just wants to tell these fake stories from Spain that never happened. Where she went to the market with her grandmother, and they got the jamon. We got the jamon, and then we make the tapas. Let her do it. Like, I mean, to me, I'm like, let her do. I look at everyone on TV and I'm like, they've invented a version of themselves. Kamala Harris used to be Indian. Now she's black. She used to be a prosecutor. Now she's gone with the police. I don't know what the hell's going on. So everybody's inventing versions of themselves in this country constantly. Why do I have to care about Hilaria Baldwin? She's not making laws, Like, I'm more worried about Elizabeth Warren who goes, I used to be a Native American. This is a problem. So, like, if everyone can these people all just invent things. Hillary Clinton's got hot sauce in her purse. She's getting shot at in Syria. I mean, it's like everybody's making stuff up all the time. I think Hilaria Baldwin is like the least of our problems.
Oh, it's so true. It's an alternate viewpoint. And that's another person that SNL can't make fun of because their other problem is they're beholden to celebrities.
They love celebrities. They want to go to the Hamptons, and everybody in SNL just wants to hang out with the people that they make fun of. And like, I always make fun. Listen, my stuff's good-hearted. I think that most people that we lampoon are fine with it. I do think that I'm a ridiculous character, so I think, there are people, Megyn McCain probably doesn't love me. I know that there's people that aren't necessarily thrilled with, I don't think any woman loves seeing me put on a wig and be them. I get it, but it's also like we are literally just having fun, and we're doing funny things. And but we also are not courting, like my goal is to be a really funny person. It's not to get invited to a party in the Hollywood Hills and have everyone like me. I think if that became my goal, my comedy suffers tremendously. And I think SNL, a lot of the problem is they have celebrity hosts. They want celebrities to feel comfortable. They want big musicians to come in. And so they're playing that game now of like, we want to make fun of celebrities, but also we want to do it in a way that still makes them really love us and feel comfortable with us. And I just think that that's the route to something that's not really funny.
Well, and now they're, SNL, you mentioned how they have a preference for these Northeastern, well-educated, advanced degree people. And, that's true of NBC on a larger basis too. And NBC News, they don't hire the people from the B-tier schools. And I would suggest to you the news product shows that in a way that's not so great for getting numbers. But now SNL and other comedians have to worry about the woke craziness going on right now because you know how it is. You can't touch anything or you're a nist. You're some sort of a nist, racist, sexist, take your pick. And I remember just as like I remember something, like I remember this stuff starting to creep into our language. I don't know, let's say 15 years ago. We're like, you can't say that or you can't do this. And I wasn't even trying to be funny. I didn't know this was considered a derogatory term, but I got in trouble at one point on the air at Fox because I said, the guy committed the crime and they took him away in the paddy wagon. And they were like, oh, you can't say that. I like, after I got off the air, I'm like, why not? They're like, it's racist against Irish people. I'm like, back to our original point, like, no, it isn't. We're fine. You will get one email from an Irish person. But also, how is it? And I learned at that time, the paddy wagon is like a reference to all the paddies who are out there boozing it up, having their too many beers and
Right.
causing trouble, getting arrested. Okay, so you can't say it. But now, of course, our woke world is lost its ever loving mind, and it's crossed over. The latest story that was in the news this week was, I don't know if you saw this, but how Bernie Sanders is getting attacked as it was his privilege. That photo of him with the big mittens that went viral.
Yes.
There's some San Francisco high school teacher who wrote a piece.
Yes.
I pulled a quote. Here it is. What she saw was a wealthy, incredibly well-educated and privileged white man showing up for perhaps the most important ritual of the decade in a puffy jacket and huge mittens. It manifests privilege, white privilege, male privilege, and class privilege in ways her students could see and feel, Tim.
Yeah, I mean, it's a, the term is mind virus. The term is, it's a disease. It's gone to the brain. It is spread. It is Invasion of the Body Snatchers. It is a zombie movie. It really, truly is all of these things. The way I feel about when you look at entertainment, I go, people got to opt out, right? So if you're an entertainer and you're a funny person, you need to build your own fan base. You need to do it online until you're not able to do that. You have to just opt out. You can't play the game. You can't try to get on SNL. You can't try to get involved in mainstream comedy right now because it isn't funny. That's why a lot of people that have great, thriving careers in mainstream comedy right now are not by their nature funny. They are, careerists. They are people who know what to say, how to say it. They love office politics. They love virtue signaling. They love having the right positions and the right package. And those people do very well in writers' rooms at NBC and CBS. And those are the people who are, running HBO and running Netflix. And those are the people that are, for the most part, the dominant cultural mode is, go along, get along, don't ruffle feathers, don't rock the boat. And wherever the prevailing winds of the day are, you just got to have no opinions and not really, you got to be liquid. You got to take the shape of your container. So, and that's what Hollywood is. People don't realize that. Hollywood is people, for the most part, that don't have strong opinions. They are really able to they're very malleable, and they're able to, whichever way the wind is blowing. Okay, are we unwoke this year? Are we woke this year? Is this year the year of elevating Asian people? Is it the year of elevating Middle Eastern people? Is it the gay year? Is it the trans year? They don't care. Their job is to buy a $10 million house in Beverly Hills and pay the mortgage. So whatever does that. But if you're a comedian, you're a digital creator, you're a podcaster, you're an independent person, you have a voice, a perspective, you're funny, you need to just build your own fan base outside of that system because that system's collapsing.
I talked to Barry about this, and we were talking about rebuilding society, or at least building a new thread in society so that normal people who don't want to live like this, as Douglas Murray put it, having to worry about secret trap doors opening up underneath you, no matter what you say and do. And the digital world is going to have to be a major part of that, right? Because I do think linear television has been overtaken by people like that. And most of us don't want to live like that or have to consume information or entertainment like that. So, but you know as well as I do that the digital world is not secure either. And we saw that after the whole Capitol Hill riot with Parler being taken down and Trump being booted off Twitter, and now all these YouTube videos get censored. And I worry, I'm sure you do too, about what about this lane? This lane is not secure either.
It's a lane where I'm trying to make money in 3 to 5 years, and I'm trying to make enough money. That's part of the move to Texas because, if I live in Cali, listen, I love Cali. I think it's a great city, but Cali's like, okay, so then you get a house in Malibu, and then you got to get a house in Bel Air. It's like, it's a no end to up, right? It's like you got to constantly make more money every year and be bigger and bigger, and you make more and more compromises and more sacrifices. And so part of the move to Austin, Texas for me, other than the fact that I think Joe Rogan, who's a good friend of mine, is going to try to really build a thriving community down there, is that I want to really make my money now because I want to save it. I don't want to give it all to Gavin Newsom. I want to save my money for the exact reason you said. I don't know what's coming down the pike. I'm a cynical guy by nature. It terrifies me that a joke I make can be taken the wrong way and I can lose. Yeah. So what I'm trying to do is build a digital infrastructure where I can have fans. I have an email list. I have a group of people that like what I do, and I'm living in a state where I don't have to give all of my money away and the cost of living is less. And all of that is really because I don't know what's coming down the pike. And it is terrifying for anybody whose career primarily exists online. That's why I try to just be funny. But again, is that going to be a defense, right? I mean, if you tweet, a man could not get pregnant today in 2021, you could lose your Twitter account, okay? I don't know what statement that's going to be in 3 years. So if you say, which was biological in the textbook and still is, if you tweet something like that, you could lose your entire Twitter. So I don't know what that statement's going to be in 24 months, 36 months, but I'm not, my outlook isn't positive.
Yeah, I know. And now they're trying to crack down on podcasts too. So they're
Sure.
soon they're going to be going through the podcast with a fine tooth comb, trying to find offensive stuff, which will be no problem whatsoever. But the reach of big tech is getting wider and more.
I think we got to get into tech. So I'm on this app Clubhouse all the time, and I'm talking to people that are in the tech space. There is a group of people that do not want this in tech. They are by no means the majority, but there is a group of people that love comedy, like comedians, understand freedom, know that people need freedom of expression. And I think for whatever reason, like I hope they gain more power, and I hope they get, more of a foothold on what's going on. I talk to some of these people. I know some of these people. I know billionaire founders of apps that text me, I love your video, this, that, the other thing. So there are people in that space that are very successful, that love you, that love, the people that we know and respect. And so I'm hoping that there's a fight. Like I'm hoping that there is some type of, pushback against this. I just don't know how successful it'll be.
Oh, no. I mean, there is a fight. It's on many fronts,
Right.
Not just on the digital world. I don't like
Right.
that app you just mentioned. What's it called again? Clubhouse?
Clubhouse.
I don't like that
addicted to
because it makes me feel like I felt in high school when I didn't get invited to the cool party. And you're like,
I know,
well,
but I did get invited.
I know, screw you.
My friends tell me, they're like, I don't like the way it says about our society that you need an invite to get on, because I didn't get an invite. And I go, okay. But it's very childish, and sometimes we have to indulge our base, carnal, childish, ridiculous id, and that's but it's hilarious. They'll let everyone on eventually, and you can get on. Megyn Kelly could clearly get on a Clubhouse. It's just a funny thing, and what's funny is that you go on this and you are talking to these and they invite me in the rooms because I'm funny. So they talk about Bitcoin or venture capitalism for 8 minutes, and then I throw in a joke. So you need somebody to keep it light a little bit.
Yeah.
But it is very interesting because the founder of Bumble was on the other night, and she goes, we got to put up guardrails online. And as soon as I hear that, I get a little nervous because I'm like, well, what is her idea of a guardrail?
Yeah, she means me.
Right. She means me. Every now and then when I hear like a white billionaire female talk, I get a little nervous because they talk like this and they go, we're really just trying to ensure that we're living in an era of respect. And I'm like, oh, she wants me in jail. Like immediately I go, this woman wants me in jail. I was hearing her talk going, she wants me in jail. But it's good to hear. I don't think they're monsters. I just think that they want everyone to be nice. That's their whole thing. Because they all have hundreds of millions of dollars. They don't want to give you any of that. But they go,
that's right.
well, I want to be the good guys. I want you to be nice. Everyone's got to be nice. And that's terrifying. So, I mean, I hope that there's some pushback and that it's successful.
I don't know. I mean, I think we are starting to they've overplayed their hand. And I do think there's going to be a massive blowback. And I think Trump being gone that's one good thing about him being gone, is that they don't have him to blame anymore. Now we just got to fight. Now the gloves are off. It's bare knuckle. Right. Let's go. You don't have anybody to blame this on. Just you punch me in the face and I'll punch you in the face, and we'll see who's stronger, who has more people on their side, who has a better argument, who wants to, who's going to control the direction of America, basically.
Yes.
But this big versus little thing, and what you were saying about the tech people who are on there, so some people who are secretly on our side, is encouraging. But it made me think of what's going on this week with GameStop and AMC. And what's your take on that? Because I know you've been tweeting about it. I confess I don't totally understand it, but I guess I get that these are companies.
There's a Reddit called Wall Street Bets, our Wall Street Bets, which has got millions and millions of people in it. And all they do is discuss stocks, okay? And basically they were looking at all these hedge funds that were shorting companies like GameStop, which means that they're essentially betting that the stock will fail and betting that, the fundamentals of the business aren't good. And they're aggressively shorting GameStop and they're aggressively shorting AMC theaters. And a lot of these guys on Wall Street bet said we could do a short squeeze here, meaning that we can pump the stock's price up by buying it, forcing a lot of these big institutional players to have to cover their shorts. And they're going to be out a lot of money and we're going to make a lot of money. And again, absolutely legal, not insider trading, absolutely 100% legal. It is collusion, my favorite new word of the last 3 years, but they're doing it absolutely legally. This is what people do all the time. They go, here's a bet, here's a play, here's what we want to do. So they started to do that and they pushed the shares of GameStop 400%.
Yeah, it was at $347 last Wednesday.
Amazing. So then what happened was Robinhood, which is the app it was a day trader app. A lot of the people were buying these shares of GameStop on this app called Robinhood. Robinhood then stopped trading on GameStop and AMC. It stopped trading on those two stocks, which is illegal. Those companies are not being investigated by the FCC. There was no reason to limit trading, limit buying of those stocks. But when you look deeper into it, Robinhood sells all their user data to Citadel, which is a massive hedge fund. Citadel owns a lot of Robinhood's data. So when you are using Robinhood, you think you're the customer, but you're actually the product. Somebody explained it like that. You're the product. Your data, what you're buying, your information is being marketed to other hedge funds who are paying for the privilege of knowing what you do online in the market because they want to know what retail investors are doing. So it was very shady because Citadel also owned, coincidentally, they were doing a lot of the short squeezes on these companies. So they're losing billions of dollars. And then Robinhood, which again is, one of Citadel's biggest clients in terms of, selling data, they stopped trading on these stocks. So it looks very bad. And then the CEO of Robinhood said, well, it has to do with capital requirements and this, that, and the other thing. But a lot of people, myself included, goes, this just looks very shady. It looks like you're protecting your guys who are losing a lot of money by stopping people from trading. So it became a big guy versus little guy thing. And of course, nothing is that simple because there was a lot of big guys like Mark Cuban or Elon Musk or Dave Portnoy, the head of Barstool Sports, who were very much in favor of this. And there were a lot of, organizations that purportedly are for, the little guy, quote unquote, that were saying that this was a, chaotic and this was fueled by Trump or whatever, it's white supremacy. I don't know. But so there was a lot of people that you would expect. What it really was is people saw an opportunity to make a little money. And what then happened was nobody is really satisfied with the explanation of the Robinhood app CEO, who basically changed the story a few times. And when you look at, so a lot of people felt like, hey, it's another thing. It's like, hey, you don't like Twitter, go on Parler. Okay, we're going to forget Parler. Okay, hey, how about we figure out a way to make money in the stock market and, wrest a little control back from these hedge fund guys. And then all of a sudden they shut off your ability to purchase stocks. So it resonated with me on a level of like, number one, I thought it was funny because hedge fund billionaires are crying on CNBC. That's hilarious. Number two, it wasn't the whole stock market was in trouble. It was big hedge funds that are in trouble. They'll be fine. And this was, to me, an example of the little guy causing a little bit of trouble. And I think that's good. I think that's okay to cause a little bit of trouble and to say, hey, we're alive, we're here. By the way, the election of Donald Trump is causing a little bit of trouble. It's people that are saying we still exist and we're going to do something that's a little crazy to get your attention. That, to me, is kind of what this GameStop AMC stock thing was. It was people going, we are alive, we exist, and we want you to notice us. And they were very successful at that.
It's interesting that you mentioned somebody like Mark Cuban or Dave Portnoy, because those are self-made guys. They didn't come from a bunch of dough where they had life made easy for them. They're scrappy. And it's probably no accident that they were like, yeah, this isn't bad. Let these guys, these amateur investors, let them do what they want to do. This is pretty cool. And score one for the little guys. But then you have people like Jimmy Kimmel, who also was a self-made guy, but, we talked about him before, saying maybe this was Russian disruptors. I mean, you get these curveballs.
It's sad. It's sad, man. It's sad to watch that. It's just the term is like tragic when you watch him do that.
Why?
because he doesn't want to say that. You could see it in his face that he doesn't want to say that. You know he doesn't want to say that. He's in such a compromised position. I guess you just make so much money, you start buying the things that money buys you. You're living a life now where you have to, constantly, please the overlords. But it's just sad to watch a comedian dismiss people making money on the stock market as Russian disruptors with absolutely no evidence. Like, that is just sad to me. I go, man, that's rough, because that guy was really funny, and he just doesn't look like he has any life in his face anymore when he talks. He doesn't look alive. And I think I tweeted like he doesn't look like he has a soul, it's a little extreme, but it really does. He looks like just somebody who's his sense of not only comedy but just being alive seems to have been robbed from him. So that's what's sad to me. He just feels like his reactions aren't his own reactions. His words aren't his own words. He seems like a vessel. And I don't know where he's getting this information from, but I imagine it's from people that have an interest in putting it out there. So
Well, but
to me,
it was
it's
interesting
scary.
because you picked up it. I heard you on Joe Rogan. You were talking a little bit about Ellen, and
Yeah.
I think they're suffering from the same thing. Like, you can get to the point where you've been so successful, you've made so much money, and you travel in these circles that are so elite that you forget your humanity. You forget who you are, forget how to
Yes.
relate to real people and what matters to real people. And I agree with you. She seems like she's not a nice person. He seems like he's crossed over to this place where he just wants to preserve this empire he's built. He says he won't even he doesn't want people who disagree with him on things like the Second Amendment or healthcare watching his show. Okay, fine.
Right.
We
Right.
won't. And Ellen seems like she's in the same place. She's got like 75 houses all over the world, perfectly
Right.
decorated. She probably spends one day every 3 years in each one. And people are like, I don't know, she's really nice. It's like, well, guess what? I can tell you, she's not. The people who know her, who
Yeah.
work for her, have told us. They've told us.
The real story to me is always more interesting than the facade. And I think that's why I'm a comic versus another type of person. Like, I don't buy when I see somebody, I don't buy it always. And I'm like, what's really going on there? And I know how hard it is to succeed, or even on the small level that I have in the entertainment business, very tough. Ellen's worked very, very hard to get where she has, but it's also like she hasn't spent a ton of time thinking about other people. This is not how you get to be Ellen DeGeneres, right? It's not how you get to be Chelsea Handler. It's not how you get to be Matt Damon. That how you get to be that is focusing on yourself. You focus on your career, your craft. I mean, this is really like, nobody wants to talk about this, but like, then you get to this position where you're thrust into the public spotlight, and then you take on this role of like that everything you do is this altruistic pursuit, and you're trying to help people and take care of people. But the reality is you don't really know how to do that. A lot more goes into that than you would imagine. A lot of your ideas aren't needed. You're not an expert. You've spent no real time doing research. You haven't met the people you purport to care about. That's the other thing. You haven't met any of these people. You don't know what they need. And so it's this crazy idea. It's very patronizing to believe that just because you have succeeded in this business, you've made oodles of money, gobs of money, that you somehow are in a better position to tell people what they need and what's going to give them a meaningful life. It's like, to me, I've never had an interest in that. I've never had an interest in looking at people and going, here's what you need, and here's who should give it to you. I don't have an interest in that. But I guess at a certain point, when you've succeeded, and you just, and an interviewer asks you like, hey, how did you succeed? You can't give the answer. You can't be like, well, I sacrificed so much for years, and I really didn't speak to my friends or family, and I just networked. I had to step on a bunch of people's heads. I barely ate. I hollowed my soul out. I learned to deal with rejection. I turned off all my emotions. The term is probably sociopath, or at least I was on the spectrum. I didn't feel for many years. I would go to Christmas and look at all these simpletons and be disgusted by them. And I just started to become, you can't do that. You have to go like, what's really important? The planet and global warming and the Green New Deal. So it's like, it's a lack of honesty. All of this comes from just a lack of honesty, and who's willing to accept it. And a lot of people are willing to accept the version of Ellen that she puts out to them because it's nicer and more comforting. But to me, I'm like, it's not interesting, and it's certainly not funny.
Can I ask you about who came to mind when you were saying that was Prince Harry?
Right.
Because he married Meghan Markle, and then not long ago he talked about how he'd had an awakening on white
Yes.
privilege and racism,
Yes.
that we're living in a world created by white people for white people. Meanwhile, this is Prince Harry. He's talking to us
Right.
from his castle, or at least had recently left it, and he's trying to lecture
Right.
the rest of us on white privilege. By the way, the guy was wearing a Nazi uniform for Halloween when he was a teenager, so it's like, okay, fine. He might have had a revelation, but like maybe he's not
Right.
the best person to be lecturing us on white privilege.
It's also like these people are wrong. Like Japan's doing great. Like there are lots of countries that have been thriving. Like to say it's a world created by white people, you're talking about the post-colonial era. You're ignoring antiquity. You're ignoring the ancient world. You're ignoring like these vast, amazing empires that existed with Persians and Assyrians and all these. But it's the insane Africa. Go back to Africa. Like it's just this ignorance of history. It's like all history starts in the period of European colonialism. They're actually dumb. Like I think that's also the problem. They're like not that smart. It's like it's really this whole thing. I see cancel culture and all this is like it's the revenge of the mediocre. These are mediocre thinkers. They're mediocre academics, and they're just elevating themselves by they're not that smart. I mean, if you listen to somebody like Camille Paglia, listen to somebody who's actually intelligent. Whether you agree with them or not, these people are actually they have a command of history and what they're talking about. It's like to ignore the hundreds of years, thousands of years of history that predate all of your cute black and white assumptions about everything. It's absurd. It's an ignorance of history that's baffling. A lot of these people have it. To say that this is a world created by white people for white people, we all know that race is a major problem, and has been forever. And it's not exclusive to white people, even though the white people, certainly in this part of the world, have practiced it and limited people's rights. And we all know that that's bad and has to change. But at the end of the day, are you diminishing the accomplishments of like the Sumerians? Like, what are you talking about? Like, are you diminishing the accomplishments of mathematics that were happening in the Fertile Crescent? Like these people are just, I don't know where they went to school, but I hope some of them get a refund.
Do you run your own business? If you do, then you know that HR issues can kill you. Such a headache, right? It's just an area you have to deal with, but you don't really want to. Wrongful termination suits, minimum wage requirements, labor regulations, and HR manager salaries aren't cheap either. An average of $70,000 a year. That's where Bambee comes in. Bambee. This company was created specifically to help small businesses. You can get a dedicated HR manager, craft HR policy, and maintain your compliance all for just $99 a month. How about that? Less than $100 a month. That's much better than $70,000 a year. With Bambee, you can change HR from your biggest liability to your biggest strength. Your dedicated HR manager will be available by phone, email, or via real-time chat. From onboarding, I guess that's the fancy way of saying hiring, to terminations, that we understand, they'll customize your policies to fit your business, and they'll help you manage your employees day to day, all again for $99 a month. Month to month, no hidden fees. You can cancel anytime. How about that? You could cancel the HR manager who you've been using to cancel all the other people. But hopefully you won't have to. You didn't start your business because you wanted to spend time on HR compliance. So let Bambee help and get your free HR audit today. Go to Bambee.com/MK right now to schedule your free HR audit. That's Bambee.com/MK, spelled BAM to the BEE.com/MK. Check it out. Now, before we get back to Tim Dillon, I want to bring you a feature of the show we call Sound Up. This is where we bring you some sound that we feel you must hear. Today, our old friend, Governor Andrew Cuomo, is the star of Sound Up. We learned this week in the New York Times that 9 top New York State health officials have quit working for this guy in recent weeks. Why? Well, likely because of comments like this, which he made on Friday. Now take a listen. You may have heard the very short comment at the beginning of this soundbite we're going to play for you. It got some media play, but very little attention was paid to the full comment, which is about as smug and gross as well, just about any of Andrew Cuomo's previous comments. Listen.
When I say experts in air quotes, it sounds like I'm saying I don't really trust the experts, because I don't. Because I don't. You want to talk about making mistakes. How did COVID come here for 3 months and nobody knew? How did COVID leave China, go to Europe, and come here? And all these federal watchdogs, nobody knew it. How did you let New York sit here for 3 months receiving passengers from Europe who had the virus and nobody knew? How did you tell us that to spread the disease you had to be symptomatic, which meant the sneezing, the coughing, that's how it spread? Only to do a total 180 degrees later and say, oh, by the way, you can be asymptomatic and spread it. What? That's all the difference in the world. It got into nursing homes because it was here before anyone knew. It was brought in by staff. It was brought in by visitors. Once it was here, they said it was spread by symptomatic people. That was untrue. It was also spread by asymptomatic people. But then to play politics with it the way they did, that was mean. That was mean. When the Trump administration was trying to divert blame, so they said, well, the states, not just New York, by the way, they blamed all the Democratic states for the deaths in nursing homes. The politics wasn't just here in New York. It was all the Democratic governors. It was New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania. Blame all the Democratic governors for the deaths in nursing homes. No, that was mean. Because if you lost someone in a nursing home, then it put a thought in your head, well, maybe it didn't have to be. Maybe my father died unnecessarily. And that was just cruel to do.
OMG. Is this guy effing out to lunch? Are you freaking kidding me? He's got the nerve to try to speak on behalf of the families who lost people in nursing homes in New York State. I mean, I almost want to call up Janice Dean right now and get her to participate in this. You know what she'd be thinking, what she'd be saying. She's coming back on soon, by the way. It was mean to play politics with it. It was mean to blame the nursing home deaths on, quote, Democratic governors. No, you, Governor Cuomo, you are to blame. You did sign an order requiring all the nursing homes in New York State to take COVID positive patients in. Even though the risks were highlighted for you and there were groups jumping up and down saying, are you insane? That's where the most vulnerable people are. It's not like they have tons and tons of room here in New York City. They're going to be stacked on top of each other, breathing all over one another, and it's the most vulnerable population. And he said, screw you, take them. And guess what? The early numbers were that 6,000 plus people died in the nursing homes as a result. Janice Dean, my pal and Fox News meteorologist who lost both of her in-laws in New York nursing homes as a result of this order, was jumping up and down for months saying it's more than 6,000. He didn't count all the patients who got transferred out of the nursing homes and sent to hospitals where they died. He's eliminated those from his numbers. And you know what his office said? She's not an expert in anything but the weather. She's not an expert. Oh my God, it's so infuriating. I want to punch his smug mouth. And guess what? She was proven correct. There was a attorney general report just last week confirming Janice was right. He way undercounted the deaths in the nursing homes. Why? To make himself look better. And now he's got the nerve to come out and play the victim. It's mean for anyone to say that he's responsible. And don't try to lump yourself in with all the Democratic governors. You did it. You, Mr. New York Tough. So take responsibility and stop acting like a baby. Because I don't. Because I don't. You don't believe the experts. You should have believed the people who were warning you about this one. This one you should have paid attention to, sir. There's now a push to get Janice to run for governor. Oh my God. It would be so amazing. It needs to happen. I've been ending every tweet about this with hashtag run Janice run. I mean, can you imagine him trying to take her on? She's the most sympathetic, kind, smart, funny, beloved figure. And he's exactly the opposite of all those things. Okay, I'm really on a tear now. But this guy is who he always was. He's a bully. He's self-pitying and self-aggrandizing at the same time. He's dishonest, and he's got blood on his hands. All it would have taken early on was a simple apology and ownership of a massive mistake he made. But he refuses to this day. To this day. How would they know? It got into the homes before anyone knew. Oh, no, they knew. You were the one who said, put it in the homes. Take the people who have COVID positive tests and put them in the nursing homes. We have it all figured out, sir. Don't play dumb and don't play the victim. Okay. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our sunny feature we call Sound Up. Back to Tim Dillon. I was at that royal wedding covering it, not as a guest.
Right.
And you could see the writing on the wall, right? They had all these guests there. They had George Clooney. They had Oprah. They had all these people who you knew. They didn't know these people, right? They didn't know them. They got connected to them because of their celebrity.
It's also like a statement because she's like, is she like half black or something? That's the whole game, right? Is that she's like diversity?
Mm-hmm.
Like, is that the whole thing? Well, good. I mean, good for her, but it's also like, you know, she's just an attractive actress. That's all I see. I'm like, oh, you're marrying an attractive actress. Good for you. You're a prince. You're marrying an attractive actress. If you want to really do something, marry me. Like, you know, like you're just marrying some hot, who can't, like, that's a seismic event that he married a hot actress. What are we doing? Like, again, it's like, it's a disease. Like, it's people that I look at who are like intelligent in every other capacity lose their mind when they go like, this is a really big day because he's marrying a woman who's not white. And I'm like, is it a big, that's great. I don't care who he marries. I mean, it's like, I think it's great. I think people of different races should get married.
Like, of course.
It's a strange.
And have been for
right. And it has been
years.
forever. Yeah. So it's a weird, like, to me, it's like odd. It's, I don't know. It's, you know, I'm 36. I'm like getting to the point now where I'm like, you know, in 10 years, I don't think I'll understand anything. That's why I'm like, make the money now. Because in 10 years, I'm going to be like, hey, man. And someone's going to go, yeah, no good. Don't say, hey,
right.
man.
Oh, totally.
Like, it's coming.
Well, that's like, you know, what we were talking about in San Francisco, that like they've lost their ever-loving minds, but they tend to be scarily a harbinger of things to come, right? They've just got rid of the schools with the names
Yes.
George Washington, Abe Lincoln, even Dianne Feinstein had to go, right? While their schools are closed, this is what they're prioritizing. How about getting the kids back in school? No, it's about getting rid of acronyms that they think acronyms are now a symbol of white supremacy, so they have to get rid of them.
Gay people over a certain age, don't understand any of this. It's like, truly, they don't get it. So what's very interesting about the trans movement is how political it is, because there's clearly like people that have gender dysphoria, people that are trans, men that feel like they're women that feel like they're men, and they correct that, and that's a great modern scientific thing they're able to do. But then there's also this just large movement of people who are like, well, I'm a queer or this or that, and it's all about politics. I mean, it's just like, it has nothing to do with who they love or want to be in a relationship with or even sexually where they're at. It's really just this political movement where they're like, well, gender doesn't exist and biology is a creation of the white male patriarchy and also communism is a good idea. And it's like, wait a minute, this comes with a lot. This doesn't seem to be solely about your gender expression. There's a lot in this bag here. And so it's, to me, I talk to other gay people that are like completely confused, especially older gay men. They have no idea. And I grew up gay people being very funny, very mean, very acerbic, said whatever they wanted. I mean, drag queens were hilarious. We now have politically correct drag queens. This is how insane we are. There used to be drag shows. It's absurd. They get out and start talking about healthcare and like, you know, like it's absurd. Like, drag queens used to do these shows in New York City that Wall Street guys used to go to because drag queens were hilarious. It was a 6-foot 6'3" guy dressed like a woman who would be smoking a cigarette on stage and say whatever she wanted to, like whatever. And people would be like, oh my God, your head was in your hands. He'll point at members of the audience and destroy them. And it was just very funny. And the reality was, listen, you can't hurt me. These are just words. I'm a 6'3" drag queen. I take the subway home. And if you start a fight with me, you're going to get a fight, because these were tough people. They're very, very tough. And the whole idea here was that words are cheap. They're funny. Life is short. It doesn't matter. It was a generation that had just got done with AIDS. And now it's like we're injecting political correctness and sensitivity into even that, where it's like you have these crazy characters that are supposed to be, by their nature, over the top. They're not depicting women. They're depicting this crazy idea of drag that's supposed to be really funny and inappropriate and not mainstream and outside of the lines by its very nature. And the funnest and coolest thing about it is that it's that. And we're making it this very boring, mainstream, like drag queen soccer mom thing where like they're supposed to be nice and they're supposed to be understanding and sensitive. And I'm just like, how boring do we want planet Earth to be? That's my only question. How boring do we want it to be? And I mean, that's my whole thing. I'm like, this is crazy.
Do you think that we're getting to the place, like when Barry Weiss was on the show, we were talking about the rise in anti-Semitism right now, and she was explaining to me why Jewish people, and I quote, don't rank, like in the field of perceived victims, right? In sort of the wokesters field of perceived victims, Jewish people don't rank, notwithstanding that whole Holocaust thing and lifetime of anti-Semitism. But okay, fine. That's why. And I kind of feel like the same thing is happening to gays and lesbians. Like it's no longer exciting. They no longer rank. They have enough power now that they've been booted out of the sort of LGBTQ. It's really just about the TQ crowd now.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's also just about what, once you have a group of people who've, gone through something and they've attained some level of respect and success, they are no longer going to be an ally of your radical, batshit crazy ideas, right? So you have to find people that are marginalized currently, that have resentment for that. And those are the people you're going to be able to mold into radicals, because people kind of lose that radical. They grow up, they get over it. They say, I found a stable relationship, or I found acceptance and love in a community, or I found whatever. And they're not, you can't go to a gay man or woman who owns a home and has a job and is doing well and get them to believe a lot of the insanity that you can get a 17-year-old to believe, who's, is just basically still figuring out who they are, what the world is. So a lot of these nefarious forces they know that. So they are preying on people that may have issues psychologically. They may have a trouble in their life, for whatever reason. And those are the people who they're going to convince, yes, it's a great idea if we get rid of the police and cut everybody's mic, not let everyone talk, deplatform everyone in mass, burn the books, take everyone's money. These are all great ideas. And when you're 17 years old and you have some issue with your sexuality or gender, that's probably, you're like, yeah, fuck it, burn it all down. I don't want any part of that. You can't come to me and say that. You can't come to me and say we're going to destroy every part of society and replace it with this. I'm going to go, no. I don't think that's a good idea, because I'm not an idiot. So they got to find people that are in their larval stage of being. When I was 17, I was kind of an idiot. So I was like, you could come to me and go, how about this? How about we steal all your parents' money, take their, and I might go, yeah, that's a good idea. When you grow up, you start going, oh yeah, we can't do that. It's actually not going to work. Whatever's coming down the pike is worse. You people terrify me more than homophobes ever have. No good. So that's what it is. It's finding people that are really amenable to the message. It's like, how do we get this message in the heads of people that most gay guys are having fun. They don't really care. They go out, they drink, they hook up, they have fun. This is not they're not sitting there reading Karl Marx. I mean, it's this weird sexless generation of asexual weirdos that just are, rehashing these genocidal ideologies and saying that these are a good idea now. And it's like, you just need to go to Chili's and go to 2-for-1 margarita night and like meet another human being.
Well,
I mean, that's really what it is. It's kind of the cure-all.
It's everywhere. And it's not just, the trans community, as you know, sort of with this over the top stuff. And I know you've been critical of the hypocrisy when it comes to the riots, in support of BLM, if that's what they were. Those are good riots, but the riot on the Capitol, that's a bad riot.
Yeah,
and
these are the
I
riots,
wanted to get your reaction because
I like. Yeah,
well, because I just saw over the past couple of days that maybe you saw this, but some Norwegian guy made the nomination, and Black Lives Matter has been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize.
Interesting.
This is a movement that burned down police stations.
Yeah,
occupied one, tried to burn cops alive. Some of the protesters did in Seattle, the Antifa group that had infiltrated them. I mean, hundreds of people injured, 700 cops, people
Crazy.
Killed. Like the thought that peace prize?
Yeah. Well, I talked about this on Rogan, and me and Rogan have discussed this a lot. The biggest change, and I'm 36, I haven't been around forever, but the biggest change in my life has been watching people from the establishment, from the media, from academia, excuse and promote violence and say that this is okay, that this is appropriate. This is a great way to get your point across, that you're allowed to riot and burn people's businesses and destroy their property and attack innocent people. That, I mean, you want to talk about a cultural shift. That was really not really like something that when I was growing up, when people were violent, for the most part, it was condemned. It might have been, people might have said it was okay in some fringe part of the, but it was pretty much roundly condemned by people that should and did at that time know better. Now, watching that has been absurd to me. Watching people excuse Antifa, BLM. On the other side, people that say, well, the Capitol riot was cool. And then what the Proud Boys do is whatever. To me, I'm like, we need to just establish something where it's like people beating each other in the streets, attacking cops, and that's the thing. Rogan's a real fighter, and Rogan understands violence, right? Rogan actually understands violence. He's a fighter. The guy's a black belt. He commentates on fighting. It's what he's an expert in. So when he sees these people that are LARPing, live action role playing, and they're going out and pretending to be fighters, they can't fight. They're all beating each other up with hockey sticks. It's kind of embarrassing. They're like theater kids who are trying to fight or whatever's going on. A guy like that looks at that and goes, you don't understand that you're opening the gates of hell. When you use violence, becomes the language. And that means you're going to get violence back. And then it just becomes an endless cycle of violence. Why nobody in the media or people that are writing articles at the Atlantic and places like that, why nobody can have that position stuns me. Like, why no one can just go, should we be opening the door? Should we be legitimizing violence like this? Should we be saying this is an appropriate way to express a political idea? To me, that's the biggest shift. If you'd said to me, like, what's the biggest shift? It's like the idea that you could go burn down someone's business and then someone will write an article defending it in the New York Times. That's the biggest cultural shift, and it's scary.
Yeah, it was, the CEO of Parler came on the program, and shortly before he was on, he had interviewed with Kara Swisher, who is, an established progressive, and she writes for the New York Times.
Aware.
And she's got I mean, I like her. I actually have a friendship with her because I can.
She's an interesting person. I don't know much about her. I heard her and Sam Harris.
She's super spicy, and she's a kick-ass person. Like I interviewed her at NBC, and this is how I first met her. And I was saying, there are a lot of women out there who are suffering from, a lecherous boss or whatever, and they just don't feel like they can speak up because they don't want to lose their job. I'm like, And on the other side, I said, there's a lot of men out there who still feel like they can get away with this crap with impunity. And what's your message? And she was like, I'm going to get you. I'm going to get you all. I like her. So she's strong.
Yeah, she's fun.
We disagree on most things political, but
yeah.
I like her anyway. But she was giving the CEO of Parler a hard time because he said that there had been a piece in the New York Times defending looting. She said, absolutely not. No, they didn't. No, no. And there 100% was a piece in the New York Times talking about defending looting. And you're right, it opens up a very slippery slope that then we saw people walk through. And I don't know whether we would have had the Capitol Hill riot if we hadn't had the summer of BLM riots. But it's very difficult for us to take the media seriously when they express outrage. Especially, I understand a police officer died and a civilian died and other people suffered related deaths at the Capitol Hill riot. But, the numbers on the BLM protests were awful. I mean, I was looking into it the other day after that Peace Prize nomination. It was the New York Post put the number at more than 700 cops injured. Forbes said in just the first 2 weeks of June, 19 were killed, mostly black. Could be higher than that. Hundreds of millions, maybe over $1 billion in property damage. So it's like, I'm not comparing them. I'm just saying to say they have nothing to do with each other, I think is too close-minded too.
Oh, of course. They have everything to do with each other. And, when AOC goes, I felt like I was going to die. It's like, okay, but you excuse and promote the activities of people that you tell them to go into restaurants and threaten Congress people. You tell them to threaten senators they disagree with. You don't mind when people show up outside of Tucker Carlson's house. You don't mind when people show up outside of the houses in Seattle and Portland. You're not vocal about that. You don't mind when people are harassed at their homes in front of their children. So I don't take people like her seriously. And again, it's unfortunate. Unless this changes, and I don't see it's changing. I mean, we're living in the end here. I mean, we're living in this is the end of reason. This is the end of all it. And the next step is just violence. The next step is unfortunately, a societal breakdown, which will be probably somewhat swift, where you just have marauding groups of people that have problems with each other that want to fight it out. And cops are going to be like, the hell with this. And I totally understand that. They're going to be like, I'm not giving my life to get involved in this. So if people keep propping up this idea that the right kind of violence is acceptable, I can't think of a worse idea for the future of this country than, hey, the right type of violence is good. I couldn't think of a worse idea. And we'll let you make that decision. The right, just violence is good. Yeah.
This is one of the problems I have with critical race theory, which is that basically is the right type of racism is good.
Correct.
And it leads to a similar breakdown in society. I mean, if you think forcing all people of all races into these mandated sessions where they're told they're awful and they're supreme, they're supremacists, or so they believe just based on their pigmentation, and that they have to lament and repent and for sins of the father, do you think that's going to make them feel good toward people of other races or not good, right? Let's be real. It's so divisive. It's going to lead to exactly the opposite result of the one that they want. But, people got their blinders on. They don't want to see that piece of the story.
Yeah, well, it's really the institutions. Nobody wants this, right? Nobody really wants this. It is truly academia. It's the media. It's now invading the courts. But people on the street, people that you talk to, people in their day-to-day lives have no use for this. They truly don't. Their concerns are largely economic. They want money. They want jobs. They want their kids to have a good life. And this rabid identity politics is, and the people like Bernie Sanders who were successful, not using that. And even though he, lost eventually, because I think that started to creep into his campaign more than it should have, but he was all about class and working people or whatever. And then the minute that, he went on Rogan and then everyone turned on him and they were like, he's an anti-trans guy. It's racist, and you're like, wait, what? So it's regular working people for the most part, I don't think have a ton to gain from the adoption of critical race theory. A lot of this is about, I believe, people creating a hierarchy that they can kind of move up in, whether it's, at a magazine, at a website, in Hollywood, whatever they do, they want to just be agreeable and they want to be able to kind of push the fashionable ideas of the day, and critical race theory is one of them. But again, this is really for upper middle class or upper class professionals who are trying to make lots of money. So what it really doesn't benefit at all is the people they purport to care about, which is working people that are working wage jobs. This doesn't help them get health care. It doesn't help them eventually, be in a position to own a home or anything. This is just this weird way for someone to guilt other people into bettering their career.
Let me ask you about Rogan, because
Yeah.
you went on there with Alex Jones, of all people, with whom I have some experience.
Did.
And so you went on there with him, and let me just start with what happened after, because there was some
Yes.
blowback. I would submit to the jury that he did not receive anywhere near the blowback for having Alex Jones on as I did for doing an interview piece with him.
Correct.
But
Correct.
okay, so you show up there. How did that happen? Wait, no, let me start.
Well, you're
at the
a woman.
End.
I mean, listen, you're a woman talking, so automatically there's blow up. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
I mean,
That's
you
fine.
you do get more. It is what it is,
I honestly, Tim, I've said this before, but I really mean it. All the blowback in the world is just fine by me. Every time they do that to me, I get stronger. Yeah, that's just the truth.
Right.
If you can look at it that way and actually try to live it that way, it's fuel. It's fuel for your muscles.
It's true.
But I saw all that blowback and I thought, okay, so what is happening with Joe Rogan at Spotify, and can this relationship possibly last? Right? That how can he last at Spotify by putting on folks like Alex Jones and then thumbing the middle finger, all of which I loved, at the people who objected. But what do you think? Can it last?
I mean, well, what is it? It's a 3-year contract, I think. I mean, I'm sure it'll last through the contract. I mean, they paid him the money, right? I mean, they'll have meetings there. They'll talk about it. People will be upset. Employees will be upset. They'll have tummy aches. They'll need to have lie downs. They'll need to take naps. In kindergarten, we took naps. They would put the mats out and we would take a nap, and then we'd go out and play kickball. So we're going to have that. People are going to have sad days. I'm very sad. And they're going to have, they're going to need to express themselves and be heard. But at the end of the day, I believe that they're going to keep their jobs because Spotify can get new people in there. These young kids that are upset about this, that can, what are they going to walk away from $150,000 a year? I mean, Spotify will get somebody else in there in a minute. So I think that that it's going to be, a lot of huffing and puffing, but they're not going to blow the house down. I mean, I don't think they're going to walk away from Joe, and obviously Joe will honor his commitment, and what's going on internally is very different, I think, than what's being reported. I think what's being reported is like there's a lot of internal strife and there's all these problems. But I think at the end of the day, it's like Spotify is a company. They have a lot of meetings about a lot of things. I'm sure there are people with concerns, but I don't see any evidence that they censored Joe or ever have.
No,
and
they stood by him.
They stood by him, and I think that's what they're going to have to do. I think the CEO of Spotify lives in Sweden or something. He doesn't care. He doesn't care.
It's amazing.
Like a mountain.
If he can make it work, honestly, if he can make it work and like stand up to the cancel culture bullies there, it's a great model. And in the same way Joe Rogan's been on a lot of fronts, but it's a great model for other people, for other employers in particular. Like you can push back against the woke bullies, and you're the one paying them. You're the one with the deep pocket. If you would just take a stand, we could seize back control of reasonable conversation.
Right. And we hope that happens.
So how did you get to know Alex Jones? How did that relationship come about?
Well, Alex is an interesting guy because I'd listened to Alex for a very long time, since I was like probably 13 or 14 years old. I would put Alex on. He was on the radio, and he was Alex Jones. He was very entertaining. He was interesting. He was crazy. He was wild. I mean, he's everything that he is now. And it's just, he's become more of a figure now. He wasn't really a figure then. But I mean, this this guy with a bullhorn that was showing up at doing 9/11 stuff. He was an enemy of the Bush administration. He was not loved by Republicans. And then he was a critic of Obama. And then he infiltrated the Bohemian Grove, where they have this, elite weekend of all these big media guys or, whatever government people. They all hang out and run around. So he had done all these things, and he was always just kind of the thorn in the side of the establishment. And he was kind of funny, kind of this weird grassroots Austin, Texas populist that was interesting, right? I mean, he was just a guy that was interesting to kind of, I'm a guy that I stay up late, me and other comics would smoke cigarettes and, at 2:00 in the morning, what are you going to watch? And you watch Alex Jones, you watch somebody who is truly outside of, and then when Trump brought him in the fold and they started to, he started to become more of a political figure. Really, there was a huge target on him. And obviously the Sandy Hook stuff, which again, and this is not even I always try, I know it sounds like I'm trying to like minimize I didn't listen to him during that period. So like, I don't know how much he brought that up. He said that he did it a few times. He probably did it a lot more than that. And I know that when you are, if you host a show about conspiracies and you look into every news story and you don't believe anything, some of your crazy fans are going to do horrible things, and what they did was horrible. And I'm not defending what he did. I'm certainly not defending what they did. But he's a fascinating person. It's like I don't know if you could have that job anywhere else other than America, to be like a full-time conspiracy theorist. And I mean, the first time I met him was I was in Austin doing Cap City, which was a comedy club there. I was headlining that, and I called Joe and I said, I was very curious. I'd never, I was just curious about all these things. And I was with my producer and I said, let's go do Alex Jones's show. So we did a show, and it was, again, he's a force of nature, very talented broadcaster, complex dude. There's demons there. There's problems there. I mean, as you can tell, you get it. And then Joe was like, hey, why don't you do his podcast with me? And I was like, oh boy. I remember talking to Joe. I was like, this is going to be really something. He goes, yeah, you'll be great, Mom. You'll be funny, Mom. He talks very quick and he's like, hey, Mom, it's going to be good, Mom. So I was like, okay. And I did it. It was this massive thing. And I did a good job, I think, being funny on it and trying to direct Alex or whatever. But, wherever I am in life years from now, I will be able to tell people during 2020, during one of the craziest periods in this country's history. And by the way, I hope so. I hope 10 years from now, it's like, this wasn't like the calm, but I hope I'm able to say that, I was very curious, and there was a media operation, in the Valley of California, Joe Rogan, that I was on, 7 times. And I was on this other thing that this guy, Alex Jones, was doing, who became the guy and the public enemy number one. And I saw his lair. I went down there to that studio and talked to them. It's all endlessly fascinating. Watching the world change and watching it change and watching the evolution of media is very interesting to me. So I want to get up close and personal. I want to see these people, understand them, try to figure out what's going on. I think as a comedian and as somebody who does kind of dark comedy or comedy that, is cognizant of what's going on, I do like to get, in these spaces and see these people. It doesn't mean I agree with Alex Jones and, about things. Some of the things he's been right about, some of them he hasn't been. But it's very interesting sitting in that little, industrial park in Austin and, watching this little, this it's not little, it's a pretty sizable operation. You were probably down there. I don't know where you interviewed him, but watching, you've been there, and you're seeing how much trouble you can get in with a few cameras.
Look,
Wild.
I got a lot of feelings about Alex Jones. He's the one person who I really get hung up on when it comes to deplatforming. I'm really
right.
I can argue to the cows come home about the importance of free speech, and I've said before, I'm a near absolutist when it comes to the First Amendment, free speech principles. I've defended a lot of crazies in their right to say crazy stuff because this is America. But I will say it's maybe ironic because some of the Newtown families were upset with me for interviewing him. For the record, I've pointed this out because NBC wouldn't say it about me openly at the time, but there were 26 Newtown families, 6 objected, and all the others either openly supported me or had no objection to my interviewing him. Okay. So the 6 who objected to my interviewing him, even though they, this had never been a thing prior when CNN interviewed him or the New York Times interviewed him or many other people. I knew that the right thing was to do the interview, even though these are the most sympathetic people in the world, because his presence and his sort of interference in business and lives had gone well beyond the Newtown families. And he had been extremely disruptive and destructive for a lot of groups, and it caused a lot of trouble, a lot of danger. And so I really thought it was time to shine a light on the guy. And now I'm actually good friends with one of the Newtown dads. His name is Neil Heslin, and he is a beautiful man. And that guy, and he's a Republican. He's not anti-speech, but Neil has said, on behalf of the other families too, this guy, he needs, what he's doing is causing real harm. All the messages put in
Yeah.
about this being a false flag and it wasn't true and Sandy Hook didn't happen. And, he held his dead son. It's like, I just can't. That's where my free speech absolutism
it's very
stops.
sticky. It's very sticky. And I completely understand the rage at Alex Jones. I understand the anger at Alex Jones. I completely understand the danger of a guy like Alex Jones. To say that he's not dangerous is absolutely, it would be minimizing it, right? That there's a danger in somebody being able to say whatever they want. The flip side of that is that there may be a greater danger allowing these tech platforms to unilaterally, without any process, without giving someone the ability to defend themselves, without any type of hearing, without any evidence presented, to eliminate people's ability to speak, to earn money, to unperson them, to act in a coordinated way where you have 6 or 7 of these platforms doing this essentially overnight at once. That also, to me, is dangerous. Now,
No, I know.
what is the
You're
greater
right.
danger? Listen, this is a debate. This is a question. It's not, when I read those Sandy Hook things, I feel horrible. I got flack from some of my friends, not many of them, but there's a few of my friends that are like, you're better than that. You shouldn't have done his show. I can't, and these are good friends of mine. They weren't like, the hell with you, but they were like, I'm disappointed. I don't know why you're choosing to sit down with somebody like this. I'm like, listen, man, people, and this is not, nobody wants to hear this, right? Nobody wants to hear that people should not be necessarily defined by their biggest mistake. Now, obviously, when someone makes a horrible mistake and it affects the lives of other people, it does define them, whether they like it or not. That will define Alex Jones forever. Alex Jones has had a career for 30 years. He's said a lot of things. He said Jeffrey Epstein was bringing people to an island to have sex with them that were underage, and he was right about that. Okay? He was saying that years before anyone else said it. He was saying things about NAFTA and the WTO and saying that, a lot of these groups are going to be, operating, outside of the public view and making huge decisions. And there's going to be massive changes to the social and global structures and economic policy. And I mean, he was, but yes, that is an indefensible part of whatever his legacy is going to be. And I don't think it should be defended. I think it should just be he did the wrong thing. He made the wrong call. And then his fans, whom many of them are mentally unhinged people. That's the other problem, right?
That is the
so you
other
have his
problem.
That is the other problem. They're mentally unhinged people. They did things that they should just go to jail forever for, in my opinion. I mean, just like throw away the key. It's like, you're harassing a family whose children died. You have, as Bob Grant, who I used to listen to on WABC when I was a child, used to say, you've served notice on society. Like you have established who you are as a person if you're willing to do that. I think Alex regrets that. I think towards the end of the episode with Rogan, I think it eats him up. I think it's why he's had issues with drinking and other substances.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of problems there. And I just think I've never in my wildest imagination would ever even defend anything, nor would anyone. My only thing is that I've always believed that if we give this power to tech, it doesn't stop with Alex Jones. It's not going to stop. It will continue. It will become a self-fulfilling prophecy, and it will just spread like anything,
I get it.
just like violence.
I mean,
but it is a tough one.
In talking to the Newtown families after that whole thing, some of them, I was in favor of his deplatforming. I just was. I saw firsthand the pain, his hitting this subject, claiming it was false, that they made up the death of their children over and over and over. He did it repeatedly. What it caused in their lives. Some of them have to go in disguise because they get harassed nonstop. They've had death threats. One guy went to jail. It's just gotten so out of hand. And even in my interview with Alex Jones, he didn't fully own it. He kept waffling back and forth. And but there was evidence. It was like crazy stuff. And I did. Even then, I was a First Amendment near absolutist, but I still thought this guy should go. And I noticed at the time a lot of conservatives saying this is a slippery slope because, they always make bad policy in response to like the worst one. The worst
Right.
one tugs at your heartstrings
Right.
and you say, okay, let's change the policy. And then that comes back to haunt people who aren't anywhere near as controversial. And, lo and behold, that's been true. So I don't have an answer. I think it's sad we can't establish like universal symbol or universal
Right.
lines that we can all say, yes, clearly that needs to not be there without completely bastardizing the principle and wind up saying like,
I
Trump
would have
can no
felt
longer
better.
tweet.
Yeah. I would have felt better if there was some way that Alex could defend himself and then he was removed. And then it was like, okay, he was removed. If he had a chance to say, here's what happened. And then they went, no, actually, here's what happened. And there was some process. I would just feel better about it if there was a process, that it wasn't just a unilateral decision.
At that point, it would have been window dressing anyway. They weren't
Correct.
interested in any defense
Yeah.
he had.
Correct.
His goose was
And I think it's
cooked.
probably pretty like that. That's where the crux of it is. It's like, it's kind of indefensible. So I don't know what his defense would
Oh,
have
it
been.
is. No,
Right.
it is.
So at the end of the day, it's like it's as good a reason as any to not be on social media, right? So, but it's just I'm a little uncomfortable with like there's no process, no, but it's a tough one.
And he is suffering from some, I think, mental issues. There's no question. And
Yeah.
that's a piece of this. And I actually, if you don't mind me asking, I
Of
noticed
course.
that you have some mental illness in your own family.
Absolutely.
And I wonder if you'd be willing to talk about it because I do think too many people are afraid to talk about mental
My
illness.
mother is schizophrenic. She was diagnosed schizophrenic probably when I was in my late teens. She'd always been kind of an eccentric, fun person, behavior a little bit erratic, but nothing too, collecting Beanie Babies and McDonald's toys and Hess trucks and, keeping odd hours and worked very hard, but we get up at 4 or 5 a.m. because she was, ran a swim program that started very early in the morning and like was, kind of this person that was very fun, but, there were real issues there. And she, was diagnosed as a schizophrenic, which means that she's got, a few mental illnesses happening. There's synapses firing that are not really hitting the other side. And again, she's a person where we talk a lot about physical illness in this country. We don't talk a lot about mental illness, especially coming from an Irish Catholic family. Most people brush those things under the rug. They're not spoken about, but it's given me an appreciation for people that have struggles with mental illness. And it's also given me kind of a contempt for what I consider the Instagram mental illness, where it's like people that are using terms like depression and anxiety, but not actually understanding what they mean. And they diagnose themselves off like a meme and on Instagram. They don't have any clinical diagnosis and they're not really, and it's given me a little contempt for that because I think there's a fetishization of that's actually pretty political, where people are like, if you disagree with me, I'm triggered and I have to go lock myself in a room. And I'm like, that's not what this is. Like my mother has real mental illness. Like she wasn't afraid of like a discussion. This is like legit mental illness. So when anybody co-opts mental illness and tries to use it as a way to get what they want or avoid uncomfortable conversations, I'm like, guys, that's really not what it is.
Or get
Knowing
attention.
what it is,
so many people today are
or to get
declaring
attention.
themselves,
Yeah,
right, to be suffering
of
from
course.
40 different illnesses. And it's like,
Correct.
you know what? You're fine. Like, you're fine.
Yeah.
I talked about this with Piers Morgan, and he had some great examples, but it's like, that's the other craze in today's day and age, just declare yourself like suffering from this phobia or that disease or this disorder or whatever, because I honestly think it's because they've been told it's not cool to be like a normal kid. You got to find something.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, my friend who was not really succeeding at comedy and now is actually doing a lot better, sat down at lunch with his father one day and he goes, I think I'm depressed. And his father says, you don't have a job, you don't have any money, and you don't have a woman. You should be depressed. So at the end of the day, there's some sometimes situational depression is situational, and you got to put yourself in another situation. And it's like, But my mother, legit, it does suffer. I do visit her. I talk to her. She's happy that I'm doing well in my career. She lives in an institution. You know, it's legit mental illness. It's not like one-man show mental illness, or I get profiled in Rolling Stone mental illness. It's legit. She has issues. So I do have an appreciation for those struggles. And I do think a lot of people in comedy are crazy. I think a lot of the people I know, you know, are struggling with all kinds of things. And I think that's what makes a lot of them talented. And it's a double-edged sword. A lot of the greatest artists throughout history have been people that have had these struggles and have been very sensitive people and have suffered. And like, that's, you know, part of, you know, people contain multitudes, and a lot of the most talented people, that talent, you know, and when you have people that are, you know, you look at a lot of the comedy that's coming out now, or a lot of the music or whatever it is, and you go, yeah, is this what healthy people make? Because if so, let's go back to crazies, because this is no good.
Do you worry at all? I mean, do you worry for yourself, given the genetic
Well,
connection?
I've asked doctors, they said that if I was going to have like a problem like that, it would have probably made itself known in the latter part of my 20s, or, I'm 36 now. I don't know that I'm super worried about that, but like, I don't drink. I'm sober. I've been sober 10 years, a little over 10 years, 11 or 12 years. So I don't really do any drugs. I don't smoke pot. And I know that, listen, everyone loves weed, but like weed can exacerbate those things. I mean, nobody wants to admit that, but that is clinical fact. And I know that's not cool
vices?
to say. Oh, I mean, I have tons of vices, right? I mean, I'm a stand-up comedian. That's a vice, I think. I think of wanting people to look at you and laugh at you and validate you as a human being is probably the big vice. But yeah, I mean, food, and, occasionally I'll put a cigarette in my mouth. And like, there are things that it's very, very hard to eat healthy and to exercise and to do the right things and be honest all the time and a good person and caring and not think about yourself that's the thing. When you become a sober person, you realize that a lot of your issues were not actually because of booze and drugs. They were the result of, just being an imperfect person. And the booze and the drugs were the medicine that actually kept those issues at bay. And so that when you sober up, you have all these things to deal with: your own self-concept, how you treat yourself, what you think about yourself, what you think about other people. And I'm in a public business where people can say whatever they want about me, and I respect that right. And I just have to deal with it. I have to ignore it or not listen to it or use what I think is useful and move on. And you're in that position too. It's like you lose the right to control what people think about you. People are going to say things that are completely untrue. They're going to say things that are somewhat true. They're going to say things that they don't have an understanding of. They're going to mischaracterize things you say and do. And you just have to go with it and go, hey, that's cool. I know. I mean, Rogan is incredibly good
to do it totally sober is impressive. Like, I have to say,
it's tough.
I've joked with my brother, I'll never become an alcoholic because it's too important to me. I'll never abuse it to the point where it becomes a problem.
Right.
Because after that stressful day, if you have that glass of wine or you have a martini, it's like, okay, I genuinely do feel better. And it is a vice. It's a crutch for sure. And if you ever do like dry January, or, in my case with my husband,
sober
it's like
October.
the dry 5 days in a row, which is about how long we'll go. You realize I'm using it for sure. I use it to help me get through feelings of stress.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that like people do use. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I just think it's like there are those people that for whatever reason are unable to have a productive relationship with it. And that is the problem. George Carlin said it perfectly. When you first start using drugs and alcohol, there's a lot of fun and a little bit of pain. There's a lot of fun, a little bit of pain. The hangovers don't even bother you. You're 17. I used to be able to drink all night and get up and go to work. And I was a lifeguard and I would work all day. Not a problem. And as you progress, it becomes more pain that offsets the fun. And the people that don't get off the train, by the end of it, when people are in the depths of an addiction, it's all pain and almost no fun. So it actually completely reverses. And that's the Carlin point about drugs, which is very fascinating, that it actually reverses itself completely from when you first start, where it's all fun, no pain, to then mid-ground, a lot of pain, a lot of fun, to the end stage, all pain, very little fun.
Yeah. I heard a saying about alcohol, wonderful servant, terrible master.
Great saying. Yeah, there's a great book called Drinking a Love Story by Carolyn Knapp, who ended up dying, but she was a writer. I think she was a journalist. I forget, maybe she wrote for the Boston Globe or something. She wrote this book called Drinking a Love Story, and it was about that she was in love with booze. She's like the uncork of the wine bottle, the sultry kind of seductive way that the wine would enter the glass. She would just sit there and, drink. And then it was this amazing way to understand it. It was an amazing way to understand it. And she articulated it beautifully as like that this is the great love story of her life was booze, and she needs to get away from it.
Sad.
Sad.
Well, I tip my hat to you for living in the comedy world without relying on vices, because I know it too often that becomes a thing. I want to ask you before I let you go, who are your favorite comedians? Who would you say are your influences?
Chelsea Handler. No.
Stop it.
Patrice O'Neill, I think, was one of the greatest comedians that's ever lived. Greg Giraldo was amazing. People like Bill Hicks and George Carlin and Joan Rivers were absolutely amazing. People like Eddie Murphy and Chris Farley, Mike Myers, and people like Adam Sandler, created the comedic world in which I lived. Jim Carrey. They created the world of which that's what I thought was funny. Will Ferrell. So there were stand-ups that were brilliant. And then, there were people that in the sketch comedy world created the things that I found really funny. And, those people to me were brilliant. Woody Allen's brilliant. Woody Allen's somebody that I grew up watching. And there's just a lot of very, very funny people. Even, on SNL, you had people like Gilda Radner and people like Jane Curtin and people, that were incredibly funny. And again, helped form my ideas of what funny was. And those people later on became like people like Sherry O'Terry or Molly Shannon or Anna Gasteyer. Like it was, really, really funny people. And then, there's so many different comedic influences that are out there, and so many different funny people that it's hard to really pinpoint. But that's the we all grow up in a world of funny. And I mean, for my grandfather, it was Jackie Gleason, and Jackie Gleason's a genius. And for me, I can appreciate Jackie Gleason and go, this guy was amazing. But my grandfather grew up in that world of like Jackie Gleason and Ed Sullivan and Johnny Carson. And it's like, I grew up in a world of David Letterman and Conan O'Brien and, all of these different, people that have added something to what I consider funny.
I love all the names you just said. Most of those SNL characters, actors, whatever, comedians I watched first time around back in the 70s when I would hang out at my Nana's house, and she let me watch endless hours of television. After she went to bed, there was nothing on except for SNL, which was definitely inappropriate for me, and I didn't get much of the humor. But those are the people who were on, back then in the 70s, and totally brilliant. And 2 points. Number one, not a single one of the ones you named are political. Like they all managed to poke fun at both sides, which is one of the reasons why we love them. Why the whole country loved them. Somebody like Johnny Carson, he got it. He knew exactly how far to push it with both sides. And number two, I hope this is a compliment, but you remind me of Chris Farley.
I always take that as a compliment.
As he is. You are as funny as he is.
Well, I don't know about that. He's a real force. We're very different types of we do different types of comedy, but he's one of the funniest people I think that's ever lived, I would say. And there's a few guys that are just really forces of nature where their talent comes from somewhere else. It's like from another planet, and it's like you're in awe of them. Whether Robin Williams was probably one of those people. Chris Farley was one of those people. Eddie Murphy is one of those people where you look at them and you're just completely amazed by the level of talent they have, and it's just not something that we can barely understand it. So I mean, listen, it's a very big compliment. I don't think I'm worthy of it, but all of those guys are tremendous. Dana Carvey, whoever, Chris Rock.
Amazing.
I mean, you look, all these guys are tremendously funny, and you just hope to be good enough that you have some small part of that world, and that somebody growing up will appreciate what I've done or what I'm trying to do, and like. That's just the hope. We're just trying to make people laugh here because life sucks. Life's hard.
If you're looking to feel valued and validated, I hope you feel it right now. I'm feeling it towards you, and I have a feeling my audience is too.
I appreciate it. You're the best, Megyn, and thank you for having me. I'm a big fan, and I hope that you continue to speak because you're an important voice out there, and we really appreciate you doing what you're doing.
Oh, thanks, Tim. And wait, before I let you go, how can people find you and support you?
Tim J. Dillon, Dillon, on Twitter and Instagram. The Tim Dillon Show is a podcast that is weekly. It's on YouTube. You can subscribe to the Tim Dillon Show on YouTube and find me on social media, Tim J. Dillon, and follow me on Clubhouse if you have the invite.
Shut up, you. You're out of here. This hour is brought to you in part by The Zebra. Find out how much money you can save on car or home insurance by visiting thezebra.com/Kelly now. And don't forget to tune in to the show this Monday because we've got Casey Johnson. Now, Casey is a college professor. He's at Brooklyn College, tenured professor. But the reason he's so interesting, not that that doesn't do it, but the reason he's so interesting is because he's been keeping a close eye for years now on the BS happening on college campuses when it comes to these kangaroo courts that purport to be neutral arbiters in sexual harass and assault cases. Nobody wants to see women sexually assaulted or harassed. Trust me, I know. But we've overcorrected in a way that's been really unfair, the process to men. They don't have due process. They can't cross-examine. They don't have the right to a lawyer in there. They don't have the right to discovery. They don't have a presumption of innocence. To the contrary, it's a presumption of guilt. And Casey's going to walk us through a couple of the latest cases because while Betsy DeVos under President Trump tried to restore due process and undo some of the damage that Obama-Biden did, one of Joe Biden's first acts as president has been to promise he's going to restore it right back and take away the procedural improvements that were put in place to make the system fair for all. No one's saying women shouldn't get a fair hearing. This is about making sure the accused also gets a fair hearing, and you need to pay attention to this because it's wrong. What's happening, it's wrong, and it's about to change back the wrong way. So that's Monday. Tune in, subscribe in the meantime, download, rate 5 stars. A review would be lovely. I love hearing from you. I have to say, I have come to the conclusion that my listeners are very smart. When I read the reviews, they're beautiful. Like, they're well written and they're thought out. Makes me feel really good about myself because I'm connecting with super smart listeners. And anyway, love it. Please do it, and we'll chat on Monday. Thanks for listening to The Megyn Kelly Show. No BS, no agenda, and no fear. The Megyn Kelly Show is a Devil May Care media production in collaboration with Red Seat Ventures.